Relevance is the key to being able to increase achievement and rigor, because that's when people engage, is when it's relevant. Then we have teachers that are getting a digital badge from us and saying, this is the first time in 30 years that I felt valued for my own professional growth.
On this episode of To The Point, Shannon Buerk, CEO of Engage to Learn. Her organization is changing the way public schools use data to tackle the most complex challenges. See, Shannon's perspective is so unique because while she's an executive who consults for schools now, her background is as a teacher and administrator. So she understands the unique problems and perspectives at every single level. In this conversation, we talk about why professional development is so important to teacher retention, about the future of education, and how the pandemic changed everything. Now, let's get to the episode. All right, Shannon, thank you so much for joining To The Point. Really appreciate you being on today.
Thanks, Zach. I'm so glad to be here. It's going to be fun.
It will be fun. So, for our audience and our viewers and listeners who are not familiar with Engage to Learn, kind of, give us a table setting of what your organization does.
So we are essentially a professional learning provider in pre-K-12 education. I was an educator. I was a high school English teacher, and then ended up being an administrator. And when I started Engage to Learn, it was this idea of, how can we be a partner to school districts to help them solve complex problems? Most of those usually revolve around adaptive solutions, people. And so how do we help, kind of move the needle on things that school districts need help with? And so whether that's launching a new initiative or turnaround or whatever. And so we started in 2012, and we've grown significantly over the years and have about 100 employees, and get to work all over the country and districts everywhere. And it's amazing work. And we're really honored to be able to partner with public schools to do what we do.
We're going to talk a lot about that this episode, kind of what those partnerships look like, what you guys help with. I want to start with some kind of general questions about you. Specifically, what's your favorite part of your role as CEO? I mean, obviously you're really passionate about this. You started the company. But yeah, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, great question. And, there are so many great things. I get to work with an amazing team, the dream team, and with great leaders in districts everywhere, which is fantastic. But I think still today, my favorite part is getting to go into districts where we're working and talk to kids. Because, when you go see them and talk to them and hear how their learning experience has changed, how they've become more engaged and enthusiastic, how their life has even changed. It's really, that's it. That's the thing. And, we help with things like changing the culture, like going into a chronically low performing school, for example, and seeing, before we start with them, before we engage with them, it's like a toxic environment. People don't feel safe. It's there's a lot of yelling and screaming or whatever, and then going back and hearing that collaborative hum with the students, engaging with each other, the teachers being enthusiastic and renewed, and then just hearing individual students say things like, I'm so glad that I'm learning critical thinking, or I love school, or I love learning, or, hearing we work with ELL, hearing some of our bilingual students say things like, I do a lot of student panels so that I can interact with them. So hearing them say things like, I finally know enough English to help my dad, buy groceries, or whatever it is. It's these very neat, so it's the kids.
Yeah, and it's probably easy. I mean, you've kind of gone from teacher, administrator, now kind of outside consultant, strategist, advisor, where it's one of those things where you get further and further away sometimes, where it's easy to drift away from the actual students in the classroom every single day. And that's ultimately the reminder of why you do it.
Absolutely. I think that is super important for every person to go back to their why on a regular basis. And if you can do that physically in some way, it's even better, So Yeah.
You know, I read online that the mission is to help neighborhood public schools become the first choice for every family. I'm curious, do you think that's the case right now? I mean, I just moved from Arizona about a year ago where school choice is a big thing. And now there's online learning, right? So there's kind of been a diminishing, or some people view going to a physical school as even less important. No, I can just, put a computer in front of my kid and they can learn. Why is the neighborhood school so important, and why is that such a foundation of your mission?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. Because I think that there are a lot of people that have a lot to gain if we go to online learning, or the neighborhood public school is no longer the foundation, because as you know, there's a lot of money spent in public education, a ton. So there's a lot of people that have something to gain if it's not that way. But really, we all will lose something. Like all of us will lose something if we don't have neighborhood public schools, because the neighborhood public school is the hub, it's the heartbeat, it's the foundation of communities. And there's a symbiotic relationship between the neighborhood and the community. And we've seen that in Revitalize schools, what it does to the community, how families get re-engaged, how people, get to know each other, start to work together, have that connection and that community where there are choices, you're right, and people are making choices. And sometimes, a lot of times that means people are, kids are driving an hour one way to school, or riding, public, like an hour one way to school. They don't have friends in their neighborhood because they're all in different places. There's no connection and community. And so I think, I know from the research that, the connection that comes from a healthy, thriving neighborhood public school it impacts very many layers of society, not just the students themselves, but it absolutely is a huge deal for the students themselves. And then just like to address the online learning piece, there's so many other things that happen besides absorbing information when you're together in the same place with, a group of people. And more than ever today, students need the opportunity to interact with people. They need to communicate face to face. They need to learn those social skills that can happen in that setting. They need to collaborate, to problem solve, and do those things. These are the things we hear from employers that, employees don't have today. Well, you don't get that from online learning. So we miss out on a lot of opportunity for, like the life ready types of skills if we're not able to bring kids together.
Yeah, that's so true. And I mean, there's more kind of, I guess, social research around that, right? The importance of kids figuring out problems, right? Not constantly being monitored by adults, right? That's Jonathan Haidt has, written a lot about that. But it is so important, to your point, in middle school and elementary school and high school, for kids to build community, to your point. And then obviously we've seen kind of, and we will continue to see, the impact of COVID as we kind of see how
Absolutely.
It has impacted all those kids.
Right.
I imagine, I wasn't planning on asking this question, but talk to me real quick as we rewind 4 years ago and think about how much your organization had to adapt to meet the needs and demands of the pandemic, and what you're, I guess, now having some time to look back, what was your takeaway, maybe both from an organizational standpoint and then from a macro impact on kids and schools?
I'll tell you what, Zach, I mean, it was so important to support teachers during those years when they were dealing with all kinds of like technical skills issues, like trying to navigate that and still do right by kids. And I mean, our coaches were meeting with people and, feeling, I mean, every day there was at least one person would cry, just like, thank you for being there for me. Like, I needed to talk through this with someone, like, help me. I mean, what we did immediately was we had every one of our coaches online learning certified so that they would understand completely all the virtual, world. And so, we were helping people do things like, hey, make sure kids have cameras on, make sure they're doing, like, there were so many things that were just, it sounds crazy now, but 4 years ago, a lot of people had never even heard of Zoom. And now it's a word like tissue and Coke, everybody uses it like it's, the only video conference, but it's like those things were very new to school districts. And so we were able to support districts during that time. We actually saw in the school districts that we supported achievement go up, believe it or not. Wow. We help people learn to use breakout rooms quickly, and how do you help students collaborate and stay engaged, like all of those things. So I think that, it was a tough time. I was literally talking to a superintendent from North Carolina today, and we were just talking about some initiatives, and she said, just somebody I've just met, but she said, obviously we're all still reeling from the learning, she said, we were like, chuk, 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 and then boom, like everything kind of crashed. And I think that's been true for everyone. This is going to be a controversial statement. I hope that's okay on this podcast, but
bring it.
So much money went to tutoring. Tutoring has never been the answer. I don't know why that was what everyone thought would, get us out of this. And so, so many, the other thing that probably won't be popular, so many companies cropped up because of ESSER dollars. So now all of a sudden there was a ton of noise for educators. They're inundated with solutions that are brand new, out of the box, somebody throwing spaghetti at the wall. They don't know the difference. So people bought a lot of stuff that, wasn't proven, didn't help. So you got a lot of things that, because of the money that came in, to the process and made it more complex and more muddy. So yeah, it was a few difficult years, and definitely will, people said, it didn't take us 10 years to recover. I think it could be more than that, but yeah.
Yeah. You just mentioned something about out of the box solutions and throwing spaghetti at the wall. One of the things, where we think about, all right, I'll give you my vantage point, which is when we think about the corporate world, we think of, data-driven, solutions-oriented, right? Shareholders. And I think a lot of people think that doesn't exist in the education world as much, right? It's hard to track data. You have different teachers. It's so individualized. But one of the things that you've really talked about at Engage to Learn is, the science of it all and utilizing data. How do you do that effectively? And how do you get buy-in? Do you ever kind of meet resistance there?
So great question. And I like the analogy with the business world, because the book, Connect the Dots, is all about basically, like trying to create the kind of what I call education intelligence in our field that business has available, through business intelligence, BI dashboards, and those kind of things. And the thing that we saw was missing. There's a lot of student data. There's a ton of student data. Too much student data, frankly.
Sure.
Teachers and principals are inundated with student data. They're constantly analyzing it, to the detriment. And there's some reports coming out now, like I like one from Harvard Business Review that basically says you can analyze the end results all day long, even if it's the outcomes along the way. But if you don't ever look at the inputs, you don't know what to do differently. So the old joke in education is, if kids aren't getting it, speak louder and slower, but it's like, what do you do differently? That's the part that hasn't been measured. That's the part that we haven't really, and we're spending billions of dollars, like $50 billion a year on these solutions. And yet we have not set standards where, okay, we have to actually measure the professional learning, the curriculum program, the technology solution, the software, whatever it is, directly related to student outcomes. So we 10 years ago said, we're going to do this. Like, we're all former educators. We were frustrated with that not being a part of the system. And we know that the educators are the key factor. So it's like, why can't we look at, instead of just saying, it's random, you get a good teacher, a bad teacher, whatever. What about upskilling and looking at that and measuring that as a leading indicator of what's going to happen with students? And we started doing that. Now we have millions of data points that say, guess what? If you incorporate and level up teachers and principals on these certain skills that are research-based, those certain skills, you will see a graph going up and to the right, exactly correlated to student growth related to this upskilling. It's pretty crazy. Like in our platform, if you have 5 badges, basically you can see like a 12% increase in student achievement. It's like, it's in one way, it seems like a really simple concept. And another way, it's like, why haven't we done this before? But we're not measuring any of those things as an industry. Once you have the inputs measured, you can tie it to the outcomes. Now you can tweak the system, right? Now you've got the whole logic model in place. So now you can tweak because you know what the outcomes are, and you can decide, oh, this input's working better. Let's double down on small group instruction. Oh, this, and so you can start to kind of like pull some levers like businesses do. So that's the idea, is let's give people more insights and probably less data, but more insights. They don't need to be analyzing it all day and trying to figure it out. Let's connect the dots.
Yeah, one of the things that's so interesting is you're talking about upskilling and the badges that teachers get once they're in the pipeline, so to speak, in the role. So much of the focus, and I'm wondering if you think it's overemphasized, is on recruitment, right? And specifically teacher pay. Again, coming from Arizona was, I want to say in the high 40s, aka the lower 10% in terms of states for teacher pay. And that was constantly, leading to districts saying, we can't hire the best people, or we hire great people, but they're, buoyed by passion. And that only takes you so far. And then they get, someone dangles a carrot of 2x the pay with better hours. So I'm curious if you think that that's not something that you address as much, but I'm curious how you kind of view that as a contributing factor towards long-term education outcomes.
Yeah, this is such an important topic. Because as you said, what I believe in, what the research shows, is that focus on pay, but especially just on getting people in, is really a misplaced, and how we certify them is really misplaced. First of all, so let's take teacher prep. First of all, like how you get prepared to become a teacher. I've never talked to a teacher, and I've talked to thousands, tens of thousands, that ever said, oh yeah, I was prepared on day one. My pre-preparation. I mean, imagine you walk into a classroom of 35 kids. Do you think anything you learned before that moment matters at all? No, it's just
you're in the baby. You're in the deep end. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. You're right. So the concept that whole system is flawed. And that's true for a lot of professions, but it is especially true with teaching. So getting people in quicker, less investment on their part on the front end, and more investment of the system on ongoing support and upskilling on the job embedded coaching as they go through the process, 100% would make a huge difference. Because, and my son, by the way, was just a first-year teacher, emergency certified first-year teacher, which a lot more people are emergency and alternative certified. You have a degree in something and then you go teach. Well, like the lack of support as you're trying to solve these problems and challenges is a huge issue. So only 63% of teachers say they leave because of lack of pay. There's a lot of other things we could do. Let's look at the other things that we could do. Number one being supporting them and giving them the opportunity to continue to level up and get better at if you feel like you're making a difference, right? In anything, it makes a big difference. If you feel like you're constantly overwhelmed with student behavior, with student mental health, with, the neurodivergent students that are in every single classroom. Every kid is neurodivergent, by the way. There is no this is, so you've got all these different needs. And if you understand and you feel like you're making a difference with that's something that retains people. And when they're floundering in that situation, the other thing that retains people is, the ability to, we say treat teachers as talent. They are the talent. And in industry, that would mean talent development. So you have career pathways. Why is it that in teaching, you get it, you become a teacher, you're a teacher for life? Because guess what? The pay is not a bad entry level job. In most places, it's equal or better than a lot of other professional jobs. A lot more time off, for example. There's some perks with it. So when people actually know, in the cities and in a lot of places, it's 60,000 plus is where you start. So
but maybe the
talent development.
Yeah, but maybe the upside isn't there. 10 years down the road, your earning potential might not be as high. Or maybe there's not, to your point, the career development, right? If you're not feeling invested in. Yeah.
Right. We should think about it like that. There are, look, I was a teacher. Yeah. I mean, that's a career. Teacher turned entrepreneur. Let's make it a career pathway. Before I was an entrepreneur, I was an administrator. I was an instructional coach. There are a lot of career pathways, but we don't think about and talk about it like that. And so I think when people go in, they think, oh, I've got to be happy with, in Arizona, $40,000 for the rest of my life. No, that's absolutely not true. So let's think about it from a career pathway standpoint, develop people in those career paths. There's some good ways of helping people level up. And I think if we think about it like talent development, then it changes. It changes the way it feels to teachers. We have teachers that are getting a digital badge from us and saying, this is the first time in 30 years that I felt valued for my own professional growth. So imagine if that, we've had people say to us, I was about to leave or retire. And now just because they're getting a chance to work on their own professional growth and upskilling, they're like, I'm rejuvenated. I want to keep doing this, So I think there's other ways for us to think about how to renew and rejuvenate the profession.
I imagine when you're having conversations with districts, you go and you share those testimonials of here's how teachers are feeling when they get these badges. But sometimes it may be challenging to say, and you need to make this investment, and here's why, right? Do you run into a reluctance to spend? Just people with tight wallets right now trying to, I guess what's the biggest barrier for some schools and administrators?
Yeah, I think the biggest barrier is that there's a really deservedly poor perception of what professional growth and professional development actually does in education, because for so many years, even though it is a huge industry, $4 billion a year, there haven't been any measurable outcomes. So it's disconnected from, if I invest in that, it's going to make a difference. So that's, again, why we believe we need to continue to connect the dots. We've connected the growth piece to retention, and we've seen a 14% increase in retention for people who have the opportunity to grow like that and be coached and supported. 14% difference is huge. It's near 100% over 6 years now. So it's I just don't think that people connect those two things. So they think of PD as some kind of initiative-driven thing, or if we're going to bring a program in. They don't think of it, again, like talent development, like industry does. High-performing organizations outside of education spend twice as much on talent development in their organizations as low-performing ones. So, it's a clear, revenue builder, right, in other industries, and it's easy to see the difference. But in education, it hasn't been tied together with data like it needs to be.
Yeah, it's harder to justify the spend when there's not a revenue number on the backside. But if you say the outcome of how students are doing, of your retention of top teachers, that in and of itself, that's your bottom line in education.
Absolutely. And if people really quantify what it costs to recruit and onboard a new teacher, which I've asked administrators, the going, rate out there is it's about $18,000 per teacher to do that. It only costs about $3,000 a year to support them with ongoing job embedded individualized coaching, and it can get cheaper from there. So it's okay, let's look at the numbers. And some people estimate, I was talking to an administrator the other day in a really large district, and she was like, it costs us probably closer to $30,000 by the time we, for what we do to onboard them and get them up to speed, versus somebody that stays with us, so that's a huge, so again, if people understand the difference, the math is, is pretty compelling, right?
Do you feel like we're on so much of the conversation right now about the future is based around AI and, I just am curious where you think the future of education is going. Obviously, we've seen the pandemic change things just in the ability to be remote, what that did for the kind of shifting workforce. what's the next, call it major domino or, seismic shift in public school education?
This is one of those questions where I think if anybody says, "Oh, this is it," they are absolutely lying. They have no idea.
And if you had the answer, you could be, a billionaire, right? Look into your crystal ball. Yeah.
Sure. I think there's any number of futures here, right? And I don't know if you've ever done that, like a future scenario planning, but there's probably, who knows how many futures, but I think there's certainly like 4 futures that I can see. Like one is nothing changes. It pretty much, and in some ways that's the most probable because of how long education has kind of stayed in the same state, right, for so long. Another is that it's gone. It is certainly, there are oppositional forces, political forces, and, economic forces that currently could, in 10 years, maybe it's not here. We talked about pre-show, but I just had a grandbaby. And so in 10 years, he'll be in 5th grade, I want to know, what it's going to look like. But I think those are probably 2. One scenario, a third one is that it's just slowly depleting as, all these other choices and we don't realize the implications of, public schools kind of, slowly deteriorating. I think, that could be a really dangerous one, kind of more the apathetic view of how it happens. But obviously the hopeful and optimistic, and what I hope happens is I think we see a lot of indicators, and this would be fabulous, of a more competency-based approach to education, and which, we use competency-based coaching as our approach to professional learning. And that is an approach where, students have differentiated pathways, they can set goals, you can use all this amazing technology, resources, and everything to create, an individualized pathway. Because you told me you have 2 kids, right?
I do. Yeah,
your kids learn exactly the same? Would they be is everything they do and the way they think and their style and all that's exactly the same?
No.
Right. And that's a crazy question, but that's the way, that's the way school is set up right now based on age. Everybody's going to be exactly alike. And that's not true. So the districts that we see doing some amazing things, and I told you at the beginning, I get to see amazing things in these districts, are taking a little bit more of a differentiated competency-based approach, using the technology, using the resources, upskilling teachers to be able to kind of, have these differentiated pathways so that your, 2 kids could, get to an outcome that they both have set goals for, but they're learning those life ready skills and autonomy along the way, and they're making some choices, having some agency about their education pathway.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's so important to differentiate, to your point. Everyone is so different, and I think sometimes you only address the outliers, right, and then keep the middle 80% the same.
Right.
And it's that middle 80%, there's a massive continuum there. So that's a great point. I want to ask you about effective communication. You're a CEO, you are a keynote speaker, you get in front of large groups, but then you also, to your point just now, talk to a lot of different leaders and districts. What do you see as kind of your strength as a communicator, or what do you kind of impress upon other leaders that you mentor around the importance of effectively communicating?
Well, I don't know. How have I done?
Good.
Today.
You're engaging. You're to the point. I got 50 minutes of sample size.
Yeah, you can evaluate me. No, I think probably if I, because I evaluate this about myself, like where did all this stuff come from, and how did I get where I am and all that. I think empathy is probably my number one, is truly trying to listen and understand where that person is. So I'd much rather engage in a conversation than do a keynote where I'm the only one talking. But if I am doing a keynote, then I am asking them, for some kind of responses, because I'm, so I think communication, there's so much noise, there's so much communication, there's so much information, people are being marketed to like crazy. And I think to cut through that, one, you have to be genuine and truly care about what you're talking about, know what you're talking about, and then really be empathetic. with the audience that you're talking to. So, people don't have or won't take time in this environment. They won't, take time for a message that isn't really relevant to them. So I think that's what's really important. Trying to figure out how do you really get to that thing that's going to help people.
Yeah. I imagine that would be your advice to teachers as well, if they're listening. I mean, empathy being so critical, right? Kind of earning the right to be heard by your students, building that trust.
Relevance is the key to being able to increase achievement and rigor, because that's when people engage, is when it's relevant to them. I mean, we're all efficient beings, so we only really want to, invest ourselves in something that's going to make a difference for us. So, yeah, absolutely.
To that point, how do you think the education system, this is, you just kind of popped up a new question in my head and I got to ask it. This is such a macro question. I apologize because it's so popular online, but the memes are about, right, the skills that we don't learn in school, right?
Yeah.
Financing, doing your taxes.
Yeah.
If you could snap your fingers and say, I would have this class taught, or I would, or public education would focus on this skill, this topic, and we would emphasize this more, what would that be?
Oh, wait, that's a. So, of course, a lot of people say financial literacy. I'm going to tell you, honestly, mine's nutrition. This is my whole, it's because it is such a foundational, wellness.
That might be better. Yeah.
Wellness, maybe it's wellness, so it is even broader than nutrition, but, people don't understand all the talk about mental health. This is my whole side hobby, is I'm very into nutrition, mental health, and how sleep impacts it, how, technology impacts it, how, blue light, the whole deal. And then, of course, fitness and nutrition and processed foods and all those things. So I feel like because it's so key to quality of life, and so many people actually deal with the effects of poor nutrition and don't even realize it. And in a country that we live in that's full of abundance, and for the most part, I know some people don't have enough to eat, for sure. I'm very well aware of that. I support that in a lot of ways. But for people that do have enough to eat, they're still not, they still don't have good nutrition. And that's a very sad thing. And it causes so many other problems. So yeah, that'd probably be mine.
Right. And at such a fundamental or foundational age, right? You build so many habits in between.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think and then the second one would be, you didn't ask me the second one, but the second one would be learning this whole coaching process, because to me, this is I've coached my nieces and nephews, my own kids, what we do in schools with the model that we use. It's a very, again, competency based, gives agency to the person, performance based, research based, evidence based, all that. It is such a good model for life, to be able to even use with a peer or yourself or whatever, to just follow this process. So that would be the next one. There's a girl that interviewed me for a book that she's writing. It's a 15-year-old, and she was asking me, about advice, and that was my number one, piece of advice for her, is just you got to follow some kind of coaching model that helps you continually work on the things that you need to get better and individually. So anyway.
Yeah, I want to drill down on what you specifically do. You mentioned badges. I know there's workshops and conferences. Kind of give me a quick high level for the audience. What all do you offer? What are the different ways for districts and individual teachers to engage with your organization?
Engage to learn.
Engage. I didn't want to say engage. I was I'm going to avoid the double engage. I was engage to learn. It felt, redundancy.
Okay. Yeah, I like it. So we help districts solve their most complex problems. And, districts can do a lot of things for themselves. Educators are very resourceful. You have to be. I was as an educator. You do everything yourself that you can. So when do you need a partner, right? Well, you need a partner to help you when you need added capacity. You don't have time, energy, resources, or don't have time to develop the process to solve some particular complex problem. So that could be for us, we'll help them with strategic plan to do that. We'll help them with, initiating a new English language learner program. Let's say that they've had an influx. We'll help them with school turnaround, chronically underperforming schools. We'll help them with implementation of new curriculum. A lot of people have bought, science of reading, literacy curriculum, and math curriculum. We'll help them actually implement that, because you can buy the stuff. That doesn't mean you're going to get the results, unless people can actually put it into practice. So we're kind of like an implementation partner, like helping people really get a return on those kind of investments and solve these complex problems by helping people change their practice. So how do we do that? Typically, and we tailor and customize to the district for sure, and make sure that, it's not just one more thing or added on top of, but it's literally an extension of what they're doing. But essentially, we do it through competency-based coaching. So we set up what are the skills, to implement this curriculum, or work with English language learners, or, improve student scores in underperforming schools, or whatever it happens to be. What are the skills that are research-based that, if you can implement these skills in practice, change the practice, you're going to get these results. We, identify those. We have a platform, and then we have folks that are very, very good at helping people set goals on those, and then start leveling up, from wherever they are. And as they level up and earn those, they get badges. And then we connect all that data back to the outcomes. So if you wanted to increase, student achievement in math or literacy, or you wanted to reduce discipline problems, or whatever the thing was, we'll connect that upskilling to those outcomes, and you'll see those results. So yeah, it's pretty good. And then, that changes the whole culture of a school as people start to grow and change and all that.
I can tell you've delivered that once or twice. That's a good, concise summary there. All right, Shannon, before I let you go, I want to ask a couple personal questions.
Okay.
If you had to summarize your leadership style in one sentence, what would it be?
Be intentional about the culture that you create, and be intentional about what you model, what you mentor or coach people to do, and what you measure.
That's good.
That's it.
You mentioned your love of kind of fitness and nutrition. What do you do to unwind, decompress, etc.?
Okay, great. So I do like to cook along those lines. I'm always pressing, like when I go to eat, people are always like, wait, what is that? And I'm like, try it, like I'll order, vegetables for appetizers, and people are like, what were you doing? So I do like to cook. I am a foodie. I love to get outside. I think getting outside is my, that's my really, I can think better. I just decompress, everything happens better there. I love to walk in the mornings. I love to see the sunrise, sunset. I'm a beach girl because I grew up on the Third Coast. So, like to go to the beach. And probably number one is like being with my family. I love to, hang with my family and spend time with them.
Last question is, it's kind of like Tim Ferriss's billboard question. So I preface it by saying, if you're able to send a push alert to every person's phone, what would your one or two sentences be?
Obviously, I want everyone to understand, let's treat teachers as the talent they are. They're the backbone of our society. Like, let's treat them like talent, which is all the things that I've told you about. But maybe we'll just give people like a little like, what does that mean? How do I treat them like talent? Because we need to do that. I think it will literally change everything. The other one is, like, be kind to everyone, starting in your own home and your neighborhood. Like, kindness is a really important thing. And I don't know. I feel like, yeah, we just all need more of it. So never know what people are going through, never know what, so if you can just like look for an opportunity to be kind and not just to the stranger, I think that's the other thing. It's just like, and even to the people that, we're around the most, we need to treat them with kindness. So, yeah. Yeah.
Look for the best in people. That's right. Mm-hmm. Shannon, that's a great way to end. So thank you so much for your time. I know it's valuable. If you like the episode, like, follow, subscribe, share, give it 5 stars, all that good stuff. Now I'll get to the point and let you get back to your day. We'll see you next episode.